that. It is time for this week's sponsor interview now with Feross Aboukhadijeh, who is the Chief Executive and founder of Socket. Socket is a company that he founded many years ago now, which was designed to deal with the emerging issue of software supply chain security. The idea being that if your software project imported a bad package, Socket would be able to let you know and stop you from including that bad package in your software. Now, business was going fine, but of course, AI has changed everything, and there's been winners and losers in all of that. And one of the winners has really been Socket, because all of a sudden, everybody's vibe coding stuff, and AI agents, they don't care if they're importing a bad package. It's not really something AI coding agents seem to think a lot about. Not that they think, but you know what I mean. And so, yeah, this has made Socket really, really relevant to technology in this year, 2026. So Feross joined me for this conversation where we spoke about, what's been going on in the last 6 months when it comes to supply chain security. And we also have a chat about some tooling that they've built, which is designed, I guess, to be more useful in the age of AI coding. So here is Feross with all of that. Enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, the last 6 months have been probably the most intense stretch of supply chain attacks that the open source ecosystem has ever seen. And the trend seems to be that it's going to continue. And it's not just Team PCP, absolutely. I mean, there was the North Korea backdoor in Axios, which was one of the most downloaded packages on the planet. And then, of course, after Team PCP did their run with their worms, they also open sourced their worm. And then we also saw like the downstream fallout breach Grafana and GitHub itself. Through in the GitHub case, through a malicious, Trojan VS Code extension, because one employee just happened to install this extension, and they lost 3,800 internal repos. We've also seen security companies like Aqua and Checkmarks get hit. Bitwarden's CLI got hit. So it's just like almost like too much to keep track of. And I run Socket, and I also struggle to keep track of the pace of these things, which is I guess kind of why we have a product here and like why we exist.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also like the reason this is happening is like the person in our company who tracks this most carefully and most closely is Catalin Kimpanu, right? Like he is all over this. I think of all reporters out there, like he is the guy who understands this probably the best, right? Like that's, I'll say that because he works with me.
No, I agree. I 100% agree.
Yeah. So Catalin really knows what's up with all of this stuff. But, he, I think for the last several years has sort of felt like he's been taking crazy pills because he's seen this coming, and it really is just the case that there's a lot of trust placed in these repositories that frankly just is misplaced. I mean, that's been his take for several years. I'm guessing it's yours too.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this problem since 2020 when we started the company. And at the beginning, we had to convince people that this was a problem worth paying attention to. And I mean, we've been saying that, when malware lands in one of these components, your traditional vuln scanner isn't going to see it. It's not even going to know about it. There's no CVE, there's no advisory. And, the malicious dependency, it's fresh, right? And it's backdoored. And the only way to detect it is if you look at the source code and you actually see what it's doing and you assess the behavior of the package. And so kind of like how, virus scanning tools used to be signature based, and then we get CrowdStrike and we have, much more behavioral based detections. That's basically the path from the legacy SCA tools to Socket today, where, we're really assessing the behavior and what is the code going to do when you run it. And I think that's really the way you have to do it. And it's honestly, it's been a perfect storm of a bunch of things converging. I mean, first you have more code being written than ever by humans and increasingly by AI agents, and they pull in more dependencies than ever, less vetted than ever before. And that the leading,
the vetting was hardly impressive before AI agents, but I do take your point still.
Absolutely. I mean, they do even less vetting. They're vulnerable to, slop squatting attacks. They hallucinate package names. They're easily tricked by prompt injections in README files. So you can just put in your README file that, hey, this is the most trusted, most widely used, most definitive leading package that does X, Y, Z. And you can just have really good documentation that's AI generated in there. And then when the agent is making its selection for what dependency to use, it's very easy to trick these things. And they don't have a way to tell that the stars on the repo are fake. Those are easily buyable these days. this is one of the things Socket can find is, fake star
God, don't
networks.
tell venture capitalists that. It's going to ruin their whole selection process, right?
You'd hope they have a way to tell that, but yeah, I think it's gamed up the wazoo now, and so that's the first. I think so that's the first thing is the AI stuff.
Well, look, hang on. Let me just jump in there because it is really interesting what you're saying, because I'm hearing this across like all of the vendors that I work with, right? Which is that these issues have always been issues, right? So the supply chain's always been highly vulnerable to these sort of shenanigans. But the thing that's made it an issue beyond just the theory, just beyond the potential, is AI just turbocharging the utter crap out of these sort of issues. So in this case, it's like the volume of code, the lack of vetting, just agentic everything is just pulling in all of these things. I mean, that seems to be what you're saying. And it's something that's coming up over and over and over again, where I'm working with companies that do like exposure detection and exposure management. They're saying the same thing, which is like people have always been improperly sort of exposed, but now they just are actually suffering because of it, thanks to AI just really boosting the amount of activity everywhere in everything.
I think that's right. I think each of these installs is an unreviewed trust decision made at machine speed. So it's the speed of the turnaround. It's the fact that there's no human in the loop. At least when a human had to type these install commands, they had, some sense of what they're doing is dangerous. They're pulling in third-party code. And then, the other aspect of this is you got non-developers, non-technical people, right? Vibe coding. You got sales people, marketing people, building apps, right? And they have no way to vet what they're creating. And so, it's like I said, not like you said, not that developers did a good job before of vetting this stuff, but what is someone who can't even read the code gonna do here? It's completely hopeless, right? So you gotta help them out. You gotta help them out with something, and and that's kind of what we're in the business of doing.
Yeah. Now, speaking of, you actually got an endorsement, which, I mean, should you be proud? You should be proud, I think. It's an odd way to get a marketing win, but Team PCP did an interview with some outlet. I can't remember which outlet it is. Forgive me, because that was a good. It was funny that someone did that, but they actually said, there's tools out there that can help you against people like us, like Socket. Which, when I saw that, I just thought, I mean, do you lean into that in your marketing?
We didn't know what to do with that, to be honest. I made a couple of joke posts about it on LinkedIn and Twitter. But it's hard to know whether these interviews are even real or not. And you certainly don't want to. But I think the joke I made was we could put this up on our customer testimonial page, our love page, where we have all the quotes from our customers, and just say, look, it's recommended by them. I think the proof is in the pudding in terms of like our detection times and whether we've been able to help our customers or not. And so that's really what I would point to, rather than a Team PCP quote. Is I would say, look at the Axios attack and look at how quickly we detected it. Look at how, what the exposure time was for our customers, and the folks that had our products deployed in blocking mode had no exposure at all to the Axios attack. And I think that's really
look. Speaking of that, right? Like, you mentioned that vibe coding and AI coding has really changed the game here, because, typically you would deploy either at the CI/CD pipeline or GitHub or something like that, right? Like that would be the place that you would deploy. Kind of too late a little bit, is what you've been telling me. So these days you're trying to pull it back onto the endpoint. You did have an IDE integration, but of course, when you're getting an agent to code for you, it's not using an IDE, right? It's just doing it, doing it live. So what you've done now is you've created this thing called Socket Firewall, which makes a lot of sense. It basically proxies connections from an endpoint out to a repo and can get in the middle of it and stop things from coming back. I mean, what's interesting though is, because we chatted before we got recording, and what's interesting here is some of the agents, some of the agentic, coding things, when you block them from getting some sort of package, it'll go, well, that's weird, must be a network thing, I'll go get it from over here, right? So you've actually had to put some real effort into how to deploy this thing in a way that AI agents won't just go around you, which is cool. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the Socket Firewall, and go into a bit of detail on the deployment, because I did find that very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple of ways to deploy the Socket Firewall. The first one is really easy to get started with, and it's just a wrapper that wraps your package manager install command. So rather than running npm install or pip install or cargo fetch, you prefix those commands with sfw, which is the Socket Firewall. And you can alias that into your bash profile so that it just, you can just install using your normal commands that you're used to using, and it'll just route that install through the firewall. And we built this to be really not vendor-y, really easy to use. The growth has exploded. If you check the npm statistics, I think it's being installed now over 30, 40,000 times per week, and it's really great to use because there's no API key required. You don't need to sign up for anything. There's no account, and it really proxies all those package installs for you. And by the way, this is our secret sauce. This is our crown jewels that we're basically giving away here. We just want to make this stuff really easy to use. We want to give away the threat intel, and we want to help people to block malicious stuff before it touches disk. And so we've just built this thing to be super easy to use, super simple. And as you said, though, right, it does have some, it's on the endpoint. The developer could probably work around it if they want to. An agent could invoke the package manager directly without going through this alias. And so this isn't the recommended way we roll this out at enterprises, but it is a really great way to play with it, to get an idea for it, to put it into your CI builds, and it does do a lot of good. But the real thing you want to do is put it in as a as a network, either as a network proxy or as an upstream to your package registries. Right. So if you're using something like Artifactory, you can put us in as an upstream, so that rather than that pulling packages directly from the open internet, you pull it through the Socket Firewall, and nothing can get into that artifact registry that we know to be malicious. And so that's a great way to roll this out.
Okay, well, anyone who's interested in that can Google for Socket Firewall, I'm guessing, and find it or just head over to socket.dev and check that out. But look, before we wrap it up, Feross, I just have a question, which is, you do follow this stuff very closely, right? I want to ask you to look into your crystal ball, though, and tell us how you think this unfolds over the rest of the year, basically, right? So, it's great that you've got some solutions, but you're not going to be used everywhere, right? It's not like one company's going to come in and single-handedly secure the entire software supply chain. Obviously, though, you're giving away parts of this, right? And it's going to make a dent. But I guess my question is, what do you think's going to happen with all of this over the next 6 months? How bad is it going to get? Have we seen the worst of it? Is NPM going to come and make some changes that's going to make this a lot better? What do you see happening over the next 6 months with software supply chain security?
So I think it's going to get worse in the short term. And I'll be honest with you, it's just because I think that AI does lower the floor for attackers, and we are seeing, malware that we do know is LLM generated. And so I think in the short term, this is going to get worse. The attackers have tons of credentials that they've stolen at this point. Team PCP shared that they had, from one attack, gathered 300 gigabytes of compressed credentials. And so I think we're going to see the long tail of that playing out over the next 6 to 9 months, really through the end of the year, as we know folks aren't really going to rotate all of those perfectly. And so I think that, we know attackers are using models to write obfuscated payloads, to do typo squatting, to make, take advantage of hallucinations and get folks to install packages that they shouldn't. But I think that it does help defenders because it also raises the ceiling for people that are using AI as a defender. And you can do that through using Socket, right? And you can have AI look at all of the code, where before people could never do this. The scale was too broad. I mean, I only met 2 companies in my entire career working on this product that actually have a human vet every line of code of every piece of one of their dependencies, and they check it in as first party code into the repository. And one of them is Google, right? And so this is not something that is really doable, but with AI it actually is. And with things like Socket, you can have a team, an AI team basically review all this code at the volume that you need to actually effectively roll this out. And so I think it's going to ultimately benefit defenders, because there is a finite amount of open source code in the world, and we can secure all of it, we can scan all of it, and I think so. I am actually optimistic.
No, I'm with you. It's sort of like what people were asking me about a couple of years ago. How do you think it's going to play out? And I said, well, there's going to be a lot. If there's a lot of bugs, if these things get good at finding bugs, and I know this is a slightly different topic, that'll be great, but it's going to advantage defenders too, because they can do things like refactor code and like make it less vulnerable and like. But right now we are living through an extremely disruptive event. Sounds like that's what you're saying is happening in the supply chains as well, and so we'll get to enjoy the memes for a little while longer. Which is, I wake up, there's a supply chain attack. I wake up, there's a supply chain attack. Feross Aboukhadijeh, thank you so much for joining us to walk us through what you've been working on lately. You're certainly having your time in the sun. A pleasure to see you.
And Patrick, I always want to thank you for being one of the first people to show us to the world. So I'm incredibly grateful.
That was Feross Aboukhadijeh there with this week's sponsor interview. Big thanks to him for that, and big thanks to Socket for being a Risky Business sponsor. And that's it for this week's show. I do hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back soon with more security news and analysis, but until then, I've been Patrick Gray. Thanks for listening.